prisoner looks at the chains on his wrists and blames the jailer, cursing the iron that binds him, raging against the walls that confine him, believing himself a victim of forces beyond his control. But the wise man looks at the same chains and asks a different question, a question that pierces through the veil of self-deception and strikes at the hidden root of all bondage. Who forged these? James Allen, that quiet prophet of mental causation, reveals the terrifying and liberating truth that most men spend their entire lives fleeing from. You are the blacksmith. Every link in the chain that binds you to poverty, mediocrity, and suffering, or lifts you to freedom, prosperity, and power, was forged by your own hand in the fires of thought. The hammer you wielded was your daily mental habit. The anvil upon which you shaped your destiny was the quality of your inner conversation with yourself. And the furnace that heated the raw metal of possibility into the hardened reality of your circumstances was the intensity of your belief, whether that belief served you or destroyed you. Most men navigate through existence thinking life is a series of random events, a cosmic lottery, where luck distributes prizes and punishments according to some inscrutable divine whim or blind mechanical chance. They speak of fortune and misfortune as if these were external forces descending upon them from the heavens, utterly disconnected from their own mental and moral conduct. James Allen destroys this comfortable illusion with the precision of a master surgeon cutting away diseased tissue. He introduces what we might call the iron law of cause and effect, a principle so fundamental, so absolute, so utterly inescapable that it governs every aspect of your existence, from the smallest daily irritation to the largest catastrophe or triumph of your life. Nothing happens by chance in the universe Allen describes. Your future is not shrouded in mystery, waiting to be revealed by the roll of cosmic dice. It is a mathematical result, as predictable as the sum of an equation, determined by the chain you started building yesterday, last month, last year, with every thought you allowed to take root in the fertile soil of your consciousness. The question is not whether you are forging a chain, you are always forging one. The only question is whether you are forging the chain that leads to the dungeon or the chain that pulls you up to the palace. And here is the crucial insight that separates the master from the slave. Once you understand this law, once you truly grasp that your present circumstances are the inevitable harvest of your past mental seeds, you gain access to a power that most men never even suspect exists. The power to deliberately engineer your future with the precision of an architect drawing blueprints. In this video, we will conduct a forensic examination of what Allen calls the causal chain, that invisible but unbreakable sequence of mental causes and physical effects that determines whether you rise or fall, prosper or perish, live in freedom or die in bondage. We will learn how to stop forging the links of disaster, those habits of thought and action that bind you to failure as surely as iron chains bind a prisoner to the wall. More importantly, we will discover how to start forging the links of destiny, constructing a chain so strong, so well made, so perfectly aligned with universal law that it becomes impossible for you to fail. This is not motivational rhetoric or empty positive thinking. This is the revelation of a mechanical process, a technology of consciousness that works with the same reliability as any physical law. You will learn how to lock your future success in place so securely, so completely, so irrevocably, that failure becomes a logical impossibility. The key Allen offers you is this: just as a prisoner cannot escape chains he does not see, you cannot break free from circumstances you do not understand. But once you see the chain, once you understand precisely how each link was forged and why it binds you, you gain the power to shatter the old chain and forge a new one. The blacksmith's forge is still burning. The hammer is still in your hand. The only question is, what will you forge next? Allen employs the garden analogy with devastating simplicity, and in that simplicity lies a truth so profound that it exposes the fundamental delusion under which most of humanity operates. If you plant corn in the ground, you get corn. You do not get wheat. You do not get roses. You do not get gold coins or precious gems, no matter how desperately you need them or how fervently you pray for them. The seed determines the harvest with absolute mathematical precision, and no amount of wishing, hoping, begging, or bargaining can alter this fundamental equation. The law is absolute, admitting no exceptions, no special cases, no lucky breaks, no divine interventions that violate the chain of causation. Your thoughts are the seeds you plant in the garden of your mind every moment of every day. Your acts, those visible behaviors that others can observe and measure, are the plants that sprout from those mental seeds. And your circumstances, the complex web of conditions that constitutes your life, your financial situation, your relationships, your health, your social position, your level of inner peace or inner torment, these are the harvest you reap from the garden you have been cultivating, whether consciously or unconsciously, whether skillfully or carelessly. If your harvest is bitter, if your life is characterized by poverty, conflict, frustration, and disappointment, Alan directs you to perform a simple diagnostic. Check the seeds you planted last season. What thoughts dominated your consciousness last year? What mental seeds did you water with your attention, nurture with your emotional energy, and protect from the destructive weeds of doubt and fear? The answer to these questions reveals everything, because the garden does not lie. It cannot produce wheat from corn seeds, and it cannot produce prosperity from seeds of fear, resentment, and mental laziness. Most men, when confronted with a bitter harvest, make the fatal error of blaming the soil, the weather, the other gardeners, or even the fundamental laws of agriculture. They rail against the unfairness of life, never realizing that they are railing against their own past choices. They demand that the garden violate its own nature to accommodate their wishes, to give them wheat when they planted corn, to reward them with abundance when they planted seeds of scarcity. And when the garden refuses to comply with this irrational demand, they conclude that the universe is unjust, that the laws are broken, that they are victims of forces beyond their control. But Alan, speaking with the authority of a man who has tested these principles in the laboratory of his own life, declares that the universe is perfectly just, that the laws are functioning exactly as they should, and that you are not a victim but an agent, not a passive recipient of random fortune, but an active creator of inevitable consequences. The seed you plant today will produce a harvest tomorrow as surely as water runs downhill, and no amount of complaining can alter this fundamental fact. What makes this principle so powerful and simultaneously so dangerous to ignore is its absolute universality. It operates in every domain of your life without exception. In your financial affairs, if you plant seeds of extravagance, short-term thinking, and financial illiteracy, you will harvest debt, anxiety, and dependence. In your relationships, if you plant seeds of selfishness, dishonesty, and criticism, you will harvest conflict, betrayal, and isolation. In your health, if you plant seeds of neglect, excess, and stress, you will harvest disease, weakness, and premature aging. The law makes no distinction between domains. It does not suspend itself because you are ignorant of its operation, or because acknowledging it would require you to accept responsibility for circumstances you would prefer to blame on others. The garden grows according to the seeds planted, and your protestations of innocence or claims of victimhood do not alter the botanical process by even a single molecule. This is why Alan's teaching is simultaneously terrifying and liberating. It is terrifying because it strips away every excuse, every rationalization, every comfortable delusion that allows you to avoid responsibility for your circumstances. But it is liberating because it means that you are not trapped by fate, genetics, social class, or any other external limitation. You are only trapped by the seeds you have been planting, and at any moment, you can choose to plant different seeds. The mechanism by which thoughts transform into circumstances is not mystical or supernatural, though it may appear so to those who have never studied it carefully. When you think a thought repeatedly, you are not merely engaging in an abstract mental exercise with no practical consequences. You are literally programming your nervous system, your habitual emotional responses, your automatic behavioral patterns, and your perceptual filters. A man who thinks thoughts of failure sees opportunities as threats. A man who thinks thoughts of scarcity interprets every financial transaction as a potential loss. A man who thinks thoughts of unworthiness sabotages his own success through 1,000 small acts of self-betrayal. The thought becomes the lens through which you perceive reality, and that perception determines which actions you take and which actions you avoid. Those actions, repeated over time, create habits. Those habits create character, and that character creates destiny. This is the causal chain Allen reveals, not as a vague philosophical principle, but as a mechanical process you can observe in operation every day if you simply pay attention. The man who plants seeds of courage today will find himself acting courageously tomorrow, not because he suddenly became brave, but because the seed has sprouted into a plant that produces the fruit of courageous behavior. The man who plants seeds of industry today will find himself working diligently tomorrow, not because he has overcome his laziness through sheer willpower, but because the seed has grown into a plant that naturally produces industrious action. But here is where the principle becomes even more precise and more powerful. The quality of the seed determines not just the type of harvest, but the abundance of the harvest. If you plant seeds of half-hearted effort, of mediocre thinking, of barely good enough standards, you will harvest mediocre results. If you plant seeds of excellence, of meticulous attention to detail, of uncompromising standards, you will harvest excellent results. The garden is perfectly just in this regard. It does not reward you for your intentions, your wishes, or your excuses. It rewards you with mathematical precision for the quality and quantity of the seeds you actually planted, and the care with which you tended them. This is why Allen insists that you must become a master gardener of your own mind, developing the skill to identify which thoughts are seeds of prosperity and which are weeds of destruction, cultivating the former with focused attention and uprooting the latter the moment they appear. Most men allow their mental gardens to run wild, planting whatever random seeds blow in on the wind of circumstance, never exercising conscious control over the cultivation process, and then they wonder why their harvest is chaotic, unpredictable, and mostly bitter. The master gardener, by contrast, selects each seed deliberately, plants it at the right depth and the right time, waters it with focused attention, protects it from the weeds of distraction and doubt, and patiently awaits the inevitable harvest. The universality of this principle means that it operates not just in your individual life, but in the lives of nations, corporations, families, and civilizations. A nation that plants seeds of corruption will harvest economic collapse. A corporation that plants seeds of short-term profit at the expense of long-term value will harvest bankruptcy. A family that plants seeds of dishonesty will harvest distrust and disintegration. A civilization that plants seeds of decadence will harvest conquest by more disciplined cultures. The law scales infinitely, operating with the same precision at every level of organization, from the individual neuron to the global economy. This is why the masters teach that if you want to understand the destiny of any person or group, you need only examine the seeds they are currently planting. The harvest is already determined, locked in place by the iron law of cause and effect, waiting only for time to reveal what is already inevitable. And this brings us to the critical insight that separates the wise from the foolish. You cannot change your harvest today. The plants are already growing. The fruit is already forming. But you can change your harvest next season by changing the seeds you plant today. This is the narrow window of freedom that exists within an otherwise deterministic system. You are not free to escape the consequences of seeds you planted in the past, but you are absolutely free to plant new seeds right now that will produce a different harvest in the future. The precision of this law means that you can treat your life as an experiment, a laboratory, in which you test the relationship between mental seeds and external harvests. Plant a seed of gratitude and observe what grows. Plant a seed of resentment and observe what grows. Plant a seed of persistent effort toward a clearly defined goal and observe what grows. Plant a seed of scattered, undirected activity and observe what grows. The garden provides immediate feedback if you pay attention, not in the final harvest but in the early sprouts. A gardener does not need to wait until harvest time to know whether he planted corn or weeds. He can see the characteristic shape of the young plant within days of planting. Similarly, you do not need to wait years to see whether your thoughts are producing prosperity or poverty. You can observe the early indicators. Are you feeling more energized or more depleted? Are you attracting more opportunities or more obstacles? Are your relationships improving or deteriorating? Are you moving toward your goals or away from them? These early indicators are the sprouts of the seeds you planted recently, and they give you the information you need to adjust your planting strategy before the final harvest arrives. This is the practical genius of Alan's teaching. He does not ask you to believe him on faith. He asks you to test the principle in your own experience, to become a scientist of your own consciousness, and to observe the results with ruthless honesty. The garden analogy also reveals why most advice about success fails to produce results. Most success literature focuses on techniques, strategies, and tactics, the equivalent of teaching someone how to harvest corn more efficiently. But if you have planted weeds, learning better harvesting techniques is utterly useless. You will simply become more efficient at harvesting weeds. The foundation of all prosperity, all achievement, all success in any domain is getting the seeds right. Everything else is secondary. This is why Alan spends so much time analyzing the quality of thought, the content of mental habits, the character of inner dialogue. These are not abstract philosophical concerns. These are the seeds that determine everything. A man with the right seeds and crude harvesting techniques will eventually prosper. A man with the wrong seeds and sophisticated harvesting techniques will eventually fail, no matter how clever his strategies or how intense his efforts. The seed is primary, the seed is fundamental, the seed is everything, and the seed is entirely within your control right now, in this moment, regardless of your current circumstances. You may not be able to change your past harvest. You may not be able to instantly transform your current circumstances, but you can right now, in this very moment, choose which seeds you plant next. And that choice, repeated consistently over time, will inevitably produce a different harvest. The finality of this principle is what gives it both its terror and its power. There is no escape from it. There is no negotiation with it. There is no appeal to a higher authority that can overrule it. The seed you plant will grow. The harvest you sow will come. The chain you forge will bind you. This is the iron law, as unyielding as gravity, as impartial as mathematics, as reliable as the rising sun. And once you truly understand this, once you internalize it so deeply that it becomes part of your operating system, rather than just an intellectual concept you occasionally remember, your entire relationship with life transforms. You stop being a victim hoping for rescue and become a creator engineering outcomes. You stop blaming external circumstances and start examining internal seeds. You stop feeling helpless and start feeling powerful, because you realize that the same law that binds you to suffering when you plant the wrong seeds will bind you to success when you plant the right ones. The law itself is neutral. It is your relationship with the law that determines whether it serves as your prison or your palace. And that relationship begins with a simple recognition. The harvest you are currently experiencing is the direct result of seeds you planted previously, and the harvest you will experience in the future is the direct result of seeds you are planting right now. The danger of the causal chain is not in its operation. It operates perfectly, with absolute reliability, but in the delay between cause and effect, a temporal gap that deceives men into believing they have escaped the law's reach. You forge the first link today, perhaps by entertaining a destructive thought pattern, by establishing a harmful habit, by making a choice that violates your own integrity. But you do not feel the weight of that link immediately. The chain does not drag you down in the moment of its forging. There is a delay, sometimes days, sometimes months, sometimes years, between the action and the consequence, between the seed and the harvest, between the crime and the punishment. This delay is the primary mechanism by which men deceive themselves into continuing behaviors that will inevitably destroy them. A man steals a small amount and gets away with it. He thinks the law has forgotten. He thinks he has found a loophole. He thinks he is clever enough to evade the consequences. And because the punishment does not arrive immediately, he steals again and again, each theft adding another link to the chain that will eventually drag him to his destruction. The delay tricks him into believing he is immune, that the law does not apply to him, that he can continue his course indefinitely without facing the inevitable reckoning. But Alan warns with the sobering certainty of a man who has studied the law in operation across thousands of lives. The law never forgets. The bill always arrives, not according to your timeline, but according to its own immutable schedule. This delay mechanism operates in every domain of causation, creating a systematic disconnect between action and consequence that most men never learn to recognize. A man eats poorly for a single day and experiences no immediate health consequences. The delay between dietary choice and physical disease might be years or even decades. During that delay period, the causal chain is still forming, link by link, cell by cell, but the process is invisible to casual observation. The man concludes that his dietary choices are irrelevant, that he can continue eating whatever he wants without consequences, because he has not yet felt the full weight of the chain he is forging. Similarly, a man neglects his relationships for months while focusing on his career, and initially, the relationships seem to tolerate this neglect. His spouse does not immediately leave, his children do not immediately rebel, his friends do not immediately abandon him. The delay between neglect and relationship collapse might be years. During that delay, he continues the neglect, adding link after link to the chain of alienation, never realizing that he is constructing his own isolation until the day the chain reaches its inevitable conclusion and everyone he loves is gone. The delay is not mercy. It is not the universe giving you more time to change. It is simply the mechanical operation of causation, which requires time to translate mental seeds into physical harvests, internal causes into external effects. Understanding the delay mechanism is crucial because it explains why most men never learn from experience. If punishment followed crime immediately, if consequence followed cause instantly, if harvest followed seed by mere seconds, learning would be automatic and universal. No one would touch a hot stove twice because the pain is immediate and unmistakable. But when the stove is delayed action, when you touch it today and feel the burn next year, the connection between action and consequence becomes obscured. You might touch the stove 100 times before the burn arrives, and by then you have forgotten about the first 99 touches. You have no clear memory of which specific touch caused the burn. You might even blame the burn on something else entirely, on bad luck or someone else's malice, never connecting it to your own repeated actions. This is why Alan insists that you must develop what we might call causal vision, the ability to see the invisible chains forming in real time, to recognize that every thought and action is forging a link even when you cannot yet feel the weight of the chain. The master does not need to wait for the harvest to know what seeds were planted. He can see the causal chain forming link by link, and he adjusts his behavior accordingly before the inevitable consequence arrives. The delay also explains the puzzle of apparently unjust success and apparently undeserved suffering. You look at a corrupt businessman who prospers for years, accumulating wealth and power through dishonest means, and you wonder if the law is broken. But the law is not broken. The chain is still forming. Every dishonest act adds another link. The weight is accumulating, and one day, often suddenly and catastrophically, the full weight of the chain becomes manifest. The businessman loses everything in a single dramatic collapse, and observers marvel at how quickly his fortune reversed, never realizing that the collapse was not sudden at all, but was the inevitable conclusion of a chain that had been forming for decades. Similarly, you might observe a good man suffering, and you wonder if he is being punished unjustly. But you are not seeing his entire history. You are not seeing the seeds he planted in his youth that are now producing their inevitable harvest. The suffering is not random or unjust. It is the perfectly just consequence of causes set in motion long ago. And if that man plants new seeds today, seeds of wisdom and virtue, he is simultaneously experiencing the harvest of old seeds while planting the garden for a new harvest. This is why Alan teaches that you must have patience with the law, understanding that you cannot instantly undo chains forged over years of careless living, but you can, starting now, begin forging new chains that will eventually produce a different outcome. The practical implication of the delay mechanism is that you must develop long-term thinking, the ability to connect present actions with future consequences, even when the connection is not immediately obvious. Most men live in a state of temporal myopia, seeing only the immediate present, making decisions based on immediate gratification or immediate pain avoidance, never considering the chain they are forging for their future self. This short-term thinking is not stupidity but a failure to understand the delay mechanism. They do not realize that the pleasure they enjoy today might be forging a link of pain for tomorrow. They do not realize that the discipline they avoid today might be forging a link of weakness for next year. They do not realize that every choice has consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment, creating causal chains that will bind them or liberate them in the future. Alan's teaching is an attempt to cure this temporal myopia by making the invisible chains visible, by helping you see the connection between present cause and future effect, even when that connection is separated by years of delay. Once you see the chain forming, once you understand that your present actions are literally constructing your future circumstances, you gain the motivation to exercise discipline in the present, even when that discipline produces no immediate reward. The delay mechanism also explains why getting away with it is an illusion, a temporary state that always ends in reckoning. A man might cheat on his taxes for years without being caught. He might lie to his business partners for years without being exposed. He might betray his spouse for years without being discovered. And during all those years, he might congratulate himself on his cleverness, believing he has found a way to violate the law without paying the price. But he is not getting away with anything. He is simply in the delay period between cause and effect, and that delay period is not permanent. The chain is forming, link by link, whether he sees it or not, whether he believes in it or not. And the longer the delay, the heavier the chain becomes, the more links accumulate, the more devastating the final reckoning will be when it arrives. This is why Alan warns against the temporary success of the wicked, advising you not to envy those who seem to prosper through wrong action, because you are not seeing the complete picture. You are seeing them during the delay period, before the chain has reached its full weight. If you could see their future, if you could see the inevitable collapse that awaits them at the end of the chain they are forging, you would not envy them but pity them. The mastery of the delay mechanism requires you to become a student of time, understanding that causation operates on different timescales in different domains. Some chains form quickly. Physical cause and effect in the material world often manifest within days or weeks. Other chains form slowly. Character, cause and effect might take years or decades to fully manifest, but all chains eventually close. All causes eventually produce effects. All seeds eventually produce harvests. There is no statute of limitations on the law of cause and effect. The universe does not forget your debts or your credits. It keeps perfect accounts, and the delay between entry and settlement is simply the time required for the chain to form completely. This understanding transforms how you approach every decision. You stop asking, "Can I get away with this?" and start asking, "What chain am I forging?" You stop thinking in terms of immediate consequences and start thinking in terms of ultimate consequences. You stop being seduced by short-term gains that lead to long-term disaster and start embracing short-term disciplines that lead to long-term prosperity. This is the shift from the slave mentality to the master mentality, from temporal myopia to causal vision, from reactive living to deliberate creation. The final insight about the delay mechanism is that it applies equally to positive and negative causation. Just as the punishment for wrong action is delayed, so is the reward for right action. This is why so many men give up on virtue, discipline, and right living. They plant the right seeds, they forge the right links, but they do not see immediate results. The harvest has not yet arrived, the chain has not yet lifted them, and in the delay period, they lose faith. They conclude that the law does not work, that virtue is not rewarded, that effort is pointless, and they abandon the very practices that would have eventually produced their liberation, giving up just before the harvest was ready to appear. Alan teaches that you must trust the law during the delay period, understanding that if you have planted the right seeds, the harvest must come. It is not a matter of hope or faith in the religious sense. It is a matter of understanding the mechanics of causation. The delay is not evidence that the law is broken. It is evidence that the law is working exactly as it should, taking the time necessary to transform internal causes into external effects. Your task during the delay period is not to doubt the law, but to continue planting the right seeds, to continue forging the right links, to maintain your discipline and your vision, even when you cannot yet see the results. This patience, this trust in the law's operation despite the delay, is what separates those who eventually succeed from those who give up just before success would have arrived. The connection between Thomas Troward's teaching and James Allen's application becomes visible when you understand that they are describing the same law from different vantage points, one from the throne of universal principle and the other from the field of daily practice. Troward gave us what we might call the logic of law, the philosophical and metaphysical foundation that establishes why the universe must operate according to strict causal principles. He demonstrated, with the precision of a mathematician proving a theorem, that the universe is governed by law rather than by chaos, that effects always follow causes according to immutable patterns, that you can predict outcomes with certainty if you understand the causes that produce them. Troward operated at the level of first principles, establishing the theoretical framework within which all causation must operate. But theory without application is sterile. Philosophy without practice is merely intellectual entertainment. This is where James Allen enters the picture, not as a rival to Troward, but as his perfect complement. Allen takes the abstract principles that Troward established and applies them to your daily habits, your moment-to-moment choices, your ordinary mental patterns. If Troward is the judge who establishes the law from the bench, Allen is the beat cop who walks the streets, watching your every move, recording every violation, documenting every instance of either compliance or rebellion against the law. And here is the critical connection that most students of these teachings miss. You cannot claim the mathematical certainty that Troward promises if you are simultaneously violating the iron law that Allen describes. Think of it this way. Troward tells you that if you plant corn, you must get corn because the law of causation is absolute and cannot be violated. This is a statement of principle, true at all times and in all places. But Allen tells you exactly what counts as planting corn in the garden of your mind. He tells you which specific thoughts are the seeds of prosperity and which are the seeds of poverty. He tells you which habits constitute planting and which constitute neglecting the garden. He tells you how to recognize whether you are actually planting what you claim to be planting or whether you are deceiving yourself by calling weeds crops. Without Allen's practical instruction, you might understand Troward's principle intellectually, but fail to apply it correctly because you do not know what the principle looks like in operation. You might think you are planting prosperity while actually planting poverty because you have not learned to distinguish between the seed of genuine abundance and the seed of temporary appearance. Troward gives you the confidence that the law works. Allen gives you the instruction manual for working with the law. Troward establishes that the universe is reliable. Allen teaches you how to become reliable in your application of universal principles. Together, they form a complete system, theoretical certainty combined with practical methodology. The significance of this connection becomes apparent when you realize that most people who fail to manifest their desires are not failing because the law is broken, but because they are misapplying the law. They read Troward and believe that thinking positive thoughts while taking no action will somehow produce results. They misunderstand the nature of causation, treating it as magic rather than mechanics. Or they read Allen and become so focused on their daily habits that they lose sight of the larger principles governing those habits, degenerating into mere busy work without strategic direction. The master integrates both perspectives. He uses Troward's philosophical framework to maintain certainty that the law will work, and he uses Allen's practical instruction to ensure he is working the law correctly. He understands that causation operates at every level simultaneously, at the level of thought, at the level of action, at the level of habit, at the level of character, and that you must attend to all these levels if you want to forge a complete chain. Troward teaches you why the chain must close. Allen teaches you how to forge each individual link. Troward inspires you with the grandeur of universal law. Allen instructs you in the humility of daily practice. Both are necessary. Neither is sufficient alone. The connection also reveals a fundamental truth about spiritual and practical teaching. They are not separate domains, but different aspects of a single reality. The spiritual principle is that thought is creative, that consciousness is primary, that mind shapes matter. The practical application is that your daily thoughts create your daily habits, which create your character, which creates your destiny. These are not two different teachings. They are the same teaching expressed at different levels of abstraction. When Troward speaks of the creative power of thought, he is describing the same phenomenon that Alan describes when he talks about how thoughts become circumstances. When Troward discusses the law of attraction, he is describing the same mechanism that Alan describes when he explains how a man of certain mental habits attracts certain types of opportunities and repels others. The language differs because the audiences differ. Troward writes for philosophers and metaphysicians. Alan writes for ordinary men and women struggling with ordinary problems. But the underlying reality is identical. And this means that you cannot cherry-pick between them, accepting Troward's optimistic promises while rejecting Alan's stern requirements, or embracing Alan's practical discipline while dismissing Troward's philosophical foundation. They are a package deal, two sides of a single coin, and you must accept both if you want to access the full power of either. The practical implication is that you must audit your life against both standards simultaneously. First, examine your life through Troward's lens. Are you living in alignment with universal law? Do you understand that the same creative power that sustains the universe is available to you? Do you grasp that effects must follow causes with mathematical certainty? Are you maintaining faith in the law's operation, even when results are delayed? This is the perspective of faith, but faith grounded in understanding rather than blind hope. Second, examine your life through Alan's lens. What specific thoughts are you habitually thinking? What actions are you repeatedly taking? What links are you forging in the chain of causation? Are your daily behaviors aligned with your stated desires, or are you planting weeds while expecting wheat? This is the perspective of works, but works informed by principle rather than blind effort. Most men fail because they operate from only one perspective. The religious believer embraces Troward, but neglects Alan, expecting the universe to reward his faith while he continues habits of sloth and self-deception. The materialist embraces Alan, but neglects Troward, exhausting himself in frantic effort while harboring inner doubts that undermine his results. The master integrates both, maintaining philosophical certainty while exercising practical discipline, combining faith and works into a single unified approach that cannot fail because it addresses causation at every level simultaneously. The connection between Troward and Alan also illuminates the relationship between immediate action and ultimate outcome. Troward teaches that ultimate outcome is determined by the quality of your mental starting point, the seed thought from which all else flows. If your seed thought is, "I am capable of prosperity," then prosperity must eventually manifest, assuming you maintain that thought and do not contaminate it with contradictory beliefs. But eventually is the key word. Between the seed thought and the final harvest lies a period of time, and that period must be filled with something. This is where Alan's teaching becomes essential. The period between seed and harvest must be filled with aligned action, with habits that support the seed thought rather than contradict it, with daily choices that forge the chain link by link rather than leaving gaps in the chain. Troward establishes the destination. Alan maps the journey. Troward tells you where you will arrive. Alan tells you how to walk each step of the path. Without Troward, you might walk diligently, but in the wrong direction, never arriving despite your effort. Without Alan, you might know the correct direction, but never actually walk, forever standing at the starting point contemplating the destination. Integration of both teachings means you walk with certainty in the right direction, step by step, link by link, until the inevitable arrival. Consider how this integration operates in a specific case: building financial prosperity. Troward tells you that prosperity is your natural state, that the universe is abundant, that scarcity is an illusion created by wrong thinking, and that if you align your consciousness with abundance, you must attract wealth. This is true, but insufficient without Alan's complementary instruction. Alan asks, "What are you doing with your money right now? Are you spending more than you earn, creating debt that advertises to your subconscious mind that you believe in scarcity?" Are you saving and investing, creating a physical representation of your belief in abundance? Are you developing skills that increase your economic value? Are you working diligently in your current position while preparing for your next opportunity? Are you associating with prosperous people or with complainers who constantly reinforce poverty consciousness? These questions address the practical links in the chain of financial causation. You can maintain perfect Troward-style consciousness of abundance, but if you simultaneously forge Allen-style links of poor financial habits, you create a contradiction in causation. The universe receives mixed signals. Your conscious mind declares prosperity, while your habits declare poverty. The result is internal conflict and external confusion, with neither full prosperity nor full poverty, but a frustrating middle state that reflects your divided consciousness. The solution is integration. Adopt Troward's consciousness of abundance as your philosophical foundation, then implement Allen's practical habits as your daily discipline, ensuring that every level of causation points in the same direction. The mastery of this integration creates what we might call causal alignment, a state in which your philosophy, your beliefs, your habits, your actions, and your expectations all point toward the same outcome, creating an irresistible momentum toward that outcome. When you achieve causal alignment, success becomes inevitable not because you are lucky or because the universe plays favorites, but because every level of causation is working together rather than fighting itself. Troward's principles ensure that your foundation is sound. Allen's practices ensure that your daily implementation is correct. Together, they create a structure so strong that failure becomes impossible. The law must produce the result because you have provided all the necessary causes and eliminated all the contradictory causes. This is not mysticism. This is mechanics. This is the engineering of destiny through the precise application of causal principles at every level of consciousness and action. And this is why serious students of prosperity study both teachers, recognizing that they are not alternatives, but complements, not contradictions, but confirmations of the same fundamental truth approached from different angles. The final aspect of this connection concerns accountability. Troward's teaching, taken alone, can be misused by those who want to believe in automatic prosperity without effort, who imagine that merely thinking prosperous thoughts while taking no aligned action will somehow produce wealth. Allen's presence in your study prevents this misuse by holding you accountable to the practical level of causation. Allen asks uncomfortable questions. If you truly believe in prosperity, why are you wasting your time on trivial activities? If you truly expect abundance, why are you not preparing to receive it by developing valuable skills? If you truly have faith in the law, why are you not investing your current resources wisely rather than squandering them? These questions force you to confront the gap between your stated beliefs and your actual behaviors, and that confrontation is essential because self-deception is the primary obstacle to success. Similarly, Allen's teaching taken alone can lead to grim workaholism, a belief that success requires constant, exhausting effort with no trust in the law's operation. Troward's presence prevents this misuse by reminding you that effort must be informed by correct principle, that work is effective only when aligned with universal law, that you can rest in certainty while taking action because you understand the mathematical inevitability of cause and effect. The integration creates a balanced approach. Faith without works is dead, but works without faith is exhausting and ultimately futile. Together they produce faith-informed works and work-validated faith, a complete approach to prosperity that addresses both the inner and outer dimensions of causation. The connection between Ralph Waldo Emerson's teaching and James Allen's instruction reveals another essential dimension of the causal architecture, this time focusing not on the theoretical foundation, but on the moral accounting system that tracks every transaction in the universe of causation. Emerson gave us the metaphor of the ledger, that cosmic accounting book, in which every action, every thought, every choice is recorded with perfect accuracy, awaiting settlement. Nothing is forgotten, nothing is forgiven in the sense of being erased. Every debt is eventually paid and every credit is eventually collected. Emerson's vision is fundamentally financial. The universe operates like a perfectly honest bank that maintains exact records of all deposits and withdrawals. never making errors, never playing favorites, never allowing anyone to truly cheat the system. The ledger records the debt with absolute precision, but recording a debt and enforcing its payment are two different operations, and this is where Allen's teaching becomes the necessary complement to Emerson's vision. Allen's chain is the enforcement mechanism that ensures the debts recorded in Emerson's ledger are actually paid. They are the same law seen from two angles. Emerson focuses on the accounting system, on how the debt is recorded and calculated. Allen focuses on the collection mechanism, on how the debt is extracted from you whether you want to pay it or not, through the chain of causation that binds you to face the consequences of your choices. The genius of combining these two perspectives is that it gives you both the what and the how of moral causation. Emerson tells you what the universe tracks: every action, every intention, every use of your time and energy and resources. If you take something without giving equivalent value in return, the ledger records a debt. If you give value without receiving equivalent compensation, the ledger records a credit. If you harm someone, the ledger records the harm as a debt you owe. If you help someone, the ledger records the benefit as a credit you have earned. This is the accounting dimension, and Emerson describes it with the precision of an experienced bookkeeper who has never found an error in his books. But knowing that your actions are recorded does not tell you how the debts are collected or the credits are paid. This is where Allen's chain enters the picture. The chain is the mechanical process by which the entries in Emerson's ledger transform into your lived experience. Every link in the chain corresponds to an entry in the ledger. Every consequence you face is the universe settling an account that was opened months or years or decades ago. Every opportunity you receive is payment on a credit you earned through past right action. The ledger records, the chain enforces. Together, they form a complete system of cosmic justice that operates with perfect reliability. The practical significance of this integration is that it eliminates all confusion about why you are experiencing your current circumstances. If you are suffering, consult the ledger to see what debts you accumulated. If you are prospering, consult the ledger to see what credits you earned. But do not make the mistake of looking only at your recent actions. The ledger goes back years, sometimes decades, sometimes to choices you made so long ago that you have forgotten them entirely. And the chain takes time to form, link by link, as past causes slowly transform into present effects. This time lag between cause and effect means that you might be paying debts from your youth while simultaneously earning credits for your current right action, creating a complex mix of consequences that appears random to the casual observer, but is perfectly ordered when viewed through the combined lens of Emerson's ledger and Allen's chain. The man who suffers despite current good behavior is paying old debts. The man who prospers despite current bad behavior is collecting old credits. But his current bad behavior is simultaneously opening new debts that will eventually come due. The system is perfectly just over time, but you must look at the complete account rather than just the current month's statement. Understanding this dual perspective also transforms your approach to ethics and morality. Most men are moral only when morality is convenient, when they can see an immediate benefit to right action or an immediate cost to wrong action. But the combined teaching of Emerson and Allen reveals that the immediate consequences are almost irrelevant. What matters is the ledger entry and the chain link. When you lie, you might gain an immediate advantage, avoiding an uncomfortable truth or securing an undeserved benefit. But the ledger records the lie as a debt, and the chain adds a link of untruth to your character, and eventually, not immediately but eventually, you will pay for that lie many times over. The debt might come due as a destroyed reputation, as the loss of trust from people you need, as a crisis where no one believes you even when you are telling the truth, as an internal degradation of your own judgment because you can no longer distinguish truth from fiction. The form of payment varies, but the debt is always paid. Similarly, when you tell the truth at personal cost, when you honor your word when breaking it would be profitable, when you act with integrity when cheating would be easier, you might suffer immediate consequences. But the ledger records a credit, and the chain adds a link of truth to your character. And eventually, not immediately but eventually, you will be paid for that integrity many times over. The integration of Emerson and Allen also resolves the apparent contradiction between mercy and justice. Is the universe merciful, allowing you to change and redeem yourself? Or is it perfectly just, demanding payment for every debt without exception? The answer is both, understood correctly. The universe is perfectly just in that every debt must be paid, every entry in the ledger must be settled, every link in the chain must be forged. There is no escape from this aspect of the law. But the universe is also merciful in that it allows you to start earning credits at any moment, regardless of your accumulated debts. You cannot erase old debts by declaring bankruptcy or claiming you have reformed. The ledger does not forget, but you can start building new credits immediately, and those credits will eventually outweigh the debts if you persist long enough in right action. This is the mercy within the justice. You are not trapped forever by your past mistakes. You are merely required to pay for them while simultaneously building a better future. The man with a long history of wrong action will experience a long period of suffering as old debts come due, but if he changes his behavior today, he is simultaneously creating future prosperity, even while paying past bills. The payments might take years or decades to complete, but they will complete. And on the other side of the payment period lies the prosperity earned by his reformed behavior. The combined teaching also explains the mechanism of what Emerson calls compensation and what Allen might call inevitable consequence. Nothing is free in the universe of causation. Every benefit you receive requires a corresponding cost. Every cost you pay earns a corresponding benefit. If you gain wealth through dishonest means, the ledger records not only the wealth gained, but also the dishonesty employed, and eventually you will lose not just the ill-gotten wealth, but additional value as penalty for the method used. If you gain wealth through honest value creation, the ledger records not just the wealth but also the honesty, and you will keep the wealth and gain additional rewards for the integrity of your methods. This is why Allen warns that the how of acquisition matters as much as the what. You cannot build lasting prosperity on a foundation of dishonest dealings because every dishonest link in the chain is weak, and eventually the entire chain will break, causing you to lose everything. But prosperity built on honest links is unbreakable because the integrity of each link reinforces the whole structure. Emerson's ledger records the quality of every transaction. Allen's chain enforces the consequences of that quality. Together, they ensure that you cannot cheat your way to lasting success because the method of acquisition determines the stability of the result. The practical application of this integration requires developing what we might call ledger consciousness, a constant awareness that everything you do is being recorded and will eventually produce consequences. This consciousness is not paranoia, but clarity. You are not worried about the ledger. You are simply aware of it, using that awareness to guide your choices. Before taking any action, you mentally record it in your own copy of the ledger. Is this action opening a debt or earning a credit? Is this link I am about to forge going to strengthen my chain toward success or bind me more tightly to failure? This internal accounting process becomes automatic with practice, transforming your decision-making from reactive to strategic. You stop making choices based on immediate impulse and start making choices based on ledger impact. You ask not, what do I feel like doing, but what entry do I want to make in my ledger? This shift in perspective is the difference between the slave who is constantly surprised by consequences and the master who engineers consequences deliberately. The slave thinks he got away with something when immediate punishment does not arrive. The master knows that nothing is forgotten, that the entry has been recorded, and that the chain is forming whether visible or not. The final insight from integrating Emerson and Allen concerns the nature of freedom within a deterministic system. If every action creates an inevitable consequence, if the chain binds you to face the results of your choices, if the ledger records everything and demands full payment, are you truly free? The answer is yes, but freedom must be correctly understood. You are not free to escape consequences. The chain will bind you regardless. The ledger will demand payment regardless, but you are absolutely free to choose which chains you forge and which ledger entries you make. This is the freedom that matters, the only freedom that exists in a law-governed universe. The freedom to choose your causes, knowing that effects will inevitably follow. You are free to forge a chain of wisdom or a chain of folly. You are free to fill your ledger with credits or with debts. You are free to plant seeds of prosperity or seeds of poverty. But you are not free to escape the harvest of the seeds you planted. This understanding of freedom, freedom to choose causes, but not to avoid effects, is what allows you to take full responsibility for your life, while simultaneously recognizing that you live within an ordered system of law. The law does not limit your freedom. The law defines the field within which freedom operates, and once you understand the law, you can use your freedom strategically to engineer the exact life you want by choosing the exact causes that must produce it. The origin of the causal chain that currently binds you or liberates you, that drags you toward destruction or pulls you toward destiny, does not begin with visible action, observable behavior, or external circumstance. The origin lies hidden in the realm of thought, in that private mental space where you conduct your inner dialogue, where you interpret events, where you make meaning of your experience, where you decide what is true about yourself and the world. This is the crucial insight that most men miss, the insight that explains why changing circumstances is so difficult. They are trying to break links in the middle of the chain while leaving the first link intact, and as long as the first link remains, the entire chain will rebuild itself. Where does the chain begin? It begins in a single thought, perhaps so subtle that you barely notice it, perhaps so familiar that you assume it must be true, perhaps so socially accepted that you never think to question it. A man thinks, "I can cheat a little." This is the first link. The thought seems harmless, merely a private mental observation that no one else can see or judge. But that thought is the seed from which the entire destructive harvest will grow. That thought is the first link in a chain that will eventually bind him completely. From the thought, "I can cheat a little," follows with psychological inevitability a progression of additional links. The thought creates a slight shift in his internal moral boundaries, a microscopic adjustment in what he considers acceptable behavior. This adjustment might be imperceptible in the moment, but it has created a permission structure for the next action. Link 1, the thought, leads to link 2, a small lie, perhaps told to avoid an uncomfortable conversation or to secure a minor advantage. The lie seems insignificant. Everyone tells small lies, but this small lie is not the isolated event it appears to be. It is link 2 in a chain that started with link 1, and it will inevitably lead to link 3. The small lie requires supporting lies to maintain consistency. The supporting lies require more energy to remember and defend. The energy expenditure creates stress. The stress creates temptation to eliminate the source of stress, not by confessing the original lie, but by escalating to more serious deception. Link 3 is a hidden crime, perhaps financial fraud, perhaps betrayal of trust, perhaps deliberate harm to someone who stands in the way. The crime seems necessary to protect the lie. The lie seemed necessary to avoid the consequences of the thought. And so the chain grows link by link, each link creating the necessity for the next link, until the man finds himself bound in circumstances he never consciously chose, but which are the absolutely inevitable result of the chain he started forging with a single, harmless thought. Link 4 is exposure and ruin, but even this is not the end of the chain. Exposure brings shame, loss of reputation, destruction of relationships, financial collapse, possibly legal consequences, and most devastatingly, the internal corruption of character that comes from having lived as a liar and a cheat. The man who began with the thought, "I can cheat a little," ends up bound in a prison of consequences he spent years building, link by link, through a chain of causation that was entirely predictable to anyone who understood the law Allen describes. And here is the crucial point. Every link after the first was necessary given the first link. Once he thought, "I can cheat a little," the small lie became psychologically inevitable. Once he told the small lie, the supporting lies became strategically necessary. Once he told the supporting lies, the hidden crime became tactically rational to protect the lie structure. The entire chain flows from the first link, with the same necessity that fire flows from the combination of fuel, oxygen, and ignition. The chain is not a series of separate choices. It is a single causal sequence that began with a single thought, and every subsequent link was already latent in that first thought, waiting to manifest as soon as circumstances provided the opportunity. To break the chain, therefore, you must destroy the first link. You cannot break it in the middle. You cannot eliminate the crime while maintaining the lie. You cannot eliminate the lie while maintaining the thought that made the lie seem acceptable. You must go to the origin, to the hidden thought that started the entire sequence, and you must destroy that thought at its root. This requires a level of honesty that most men never achieve because it requires admitting that your suffering is not the result of bad luck or other people's malice, but the result of your own mental habits, choices you made long ago that have now matured into the circumstances you face. The man suffering in the prison of Link 4 might rage against his accusers, against the legal system, against society's unfairness, never acknowledging that he is suffering the inevitable consequence of the chain he forged, starting with Link 1. But the man who understands Alan's teaching looks past all the intermediate links, traces the chain back to its origin, and asks, what thought started this? What mental permission did I give myself? What subtle boundary did I violate in my thinking that made all subsequent violations possible? This ruthless self-examination, this willingness to take complete responsibility for your circumstances by tracing them back to their mental origins, is the beginning of liberation. The diagnostic process Alan implicitly recommends requires what we might call a safety audit on your mind, a systematic examination of your habitual thought patterns to identify the weak links that will eventually destroy you if left uncorrected. What thoughts do you entertain regularly that contradict your stated values? Where do you give yourself permission to operate at less than your best? What compromises do you accept that you know violate your integrity? What lazy thoughts do you indulge because everyone else seems to think them too? What angry thoughts do you nurture because they give you a feeling of righteousness? What dishonest thoughts do you maintain because the truth would require uncomfortable change? These are the first. Links in chains of destruction, and they must be identified and destroyed before they manifest into the later links of visible consequence. The audit is not pleasant because it requires seeing yourself as you actually are, rather than as you pretend to be. But this unpleasant clarity is essential because you cannot fix a problem you refuse to acknowledge. The replacement process is equally crucial. It is not enough to simply stop thinking destructive thoughts. Nature abhors a vacuum, and mental space cleared of one thought will quickly fill with another thought, unless you deliberately plant something better. Alan insists that you must replace weak links with links of steel, that you must substitute destructive thoughts with constructive thoughts, that you must build new chains of strength to replace the old chains of weakness. If you find that you habitually think thoughts of laziness, you must replace them with thoughts of industry, not just once but repeatedly, until the new thought becomes as automatic as the old thought was. If you find that you habitually think thoughts of anger, you must replace them with thoughts of patience, not through suppression of anger, but through cultivation of genuine understanding. If you find that you habitually think thoughts of dishonesty, you must replace them with thoughts of truth, accepting whatever short-term costs come from living honestly, because you understand that the long-term cost of dishonesty is infinitely greater. This replacement process is the practical work of forging new chains, and it requires consistent daily effort, not dramatic one-time changes, but the accumulation of thousands of small choices to think differently, to act differently, to be different. The standard by which you evaluate your thoughts must be absolute rather than relative. Most men evaluate their thoughts by comparing themselves to others. I'm not as lazy as him, so I'm doing fine. I'm not as dishonest as her, so I'm basically honest. But this relative standard is worthless because it allows you to maintain destructive patterns as long as you can find someone worse. Alan's standard is absolute. Does this thought lead toward the life I want or away from it? Does this thought forge a link in the chain of success or the chain of failure? Is this thought of the quality that matches my highest ideals, or is it a compromise with mediocrity? You cannot build a golden future with lead chains regardless of how many people are building with chains of even cheaper material. The quality of your thought must match the quality of the life you intend to create, and anything less than that standard is a weak link that will eventually break under stress. This is why Alan's teaching is simultaneously compassionate and demanding. Compassionate because it offers you complete control over your destiny. Demanding because it requires you to exercise that control with unwavering discipline in the only place where control is actually possible, your own mind. The final aspect of destroying the first link concerns the relationship between thought and identity. Your habitual thoughts are not just mental events passing through your consciousness. They are the raw material from which your identity is constructed. When you think, "I can cheat a little," you are not just considering a possible action. You are defining yourself as the kind of person who cheats. When you think, "I don't need to try my best," you are defining yourself as the kind of person who accepts mediocrity. When you think, "I'm not good enough," you are defining yourself as inadequate. These identity-level thoughts are the most dangerous first links because they operate below the level of conscious choice, informing all your subsequent behavior without your awareness. A man who has defined himself as a cheater will cheat when opportunity arises, not because he consciously decides to cheat in that moment, but because cheating is consistent with his identity. A man who has defined himself as mediocre will sabotage his own success, not because he consciously wants to fail, but because success would contradict his identity. To change your circumstances, you must change your behavior. To change your behavior, you must change your thoughts. But to change your thoughts permanently, you must change your identity, your fundamental sense of who you are at the deepest level. This is the most profound work Alan calls you to, not just better behavior or even better thinking, but a reformation of identity itself, becoming at the level of self-definition the kind of person whose natural behavior produces the circumstances you desire. The rectification of the mind is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process, a daily discipline that requires the same attention an engineer gives to maintaining critical infrastructure. Your mind is the infrastructure upon which your entire life is built, and like any infrastructure, it requires regular inspection, maintenance, and repair. The safety audit that Alan implicitly recommends must become a habitual practice, performed not once when you are in crisis, but continuously as a preventive measure. Look for the weak links before they break. Identify the destructive thought patterns before they manifest into destructive behavior. Catch the first link of the chain in formation before it has time to add link 2 and link 3. This preventive approach is infinitely more efficient than the remedial approach of trying to fix broken chains after they have already destroyed your life. The master gardener pulls weeds when they are seedlings, not when they have grown into massive plants with root systems that require dynamite to remove. Similarly, the master of his mind eliminates destructive thoughts when they first appear, not after they have grown into habitual patterns that dominate his entire consciousness. The specific weak links that require attention will vary from person to person, but Alan identifies 3 categories that are universal threats to prosperity and success: laziness, anger, and dishonesty. These 3 thought patterns are the primary destructive forces in most men's minds. The weak links that break most chains, the weeds that destroy most gardens. Laziness manifests as the thought, "I'll do it later. This is good enough, I don't feel like it right now, someone else will handle it." These thoughts seem harmless, merely expressions of natural human desire for rest and ease. But laziness is not rest. Rest is the deliberate recovery of energy after productive effort. Laziness is the avoidance of productive effort itself, the decision to leave important work undone, not because you need to recover, but because you want to avoid discomfort. And this thought pattern, repeated over time, creates a character defined by procrastination, mediocrity, and unrealized potential. The man who thinks, "I'll do it later," repeatedly eventually becomes the man who never does it at all, who watches opportunity after opportunity slip away because he could not motivate himself to take action when action was required. The chain of laziness leads to poverty, not because the lazy man is punished by external forces, but because poverty is the natural consequence of not doing the work that creates value. Anger manifests as the thought, "He shouldn't have done that. She has no right. This is unfair. Someone must pay." These thoughts feel justified, especially when you have been genuinely wronged. But anger is not justice. Justice is the proper balancing of accounts, the correct application of consequences. Anger is the emotional noise that prevents you from thinking clearly about justice, the toxic fuel that drives you to escalate conflicts beyond any rational proportion, the poison that destroys your own peace while claiming to pursue righteousness. And this thought pattern, repeated over time, creates a character defined by conflict, litigation, broken relationships, and isolation. The man who thinks angry thoughts habitually eventually becomes surrounded by enemies, not because the world is unfair, but because he has spent years forging links of hostility that bind him to constant conflict. The chain of anger leads to isolation and violence, not because angry people are punished by cosmic forces, but because isolation and violence are the natural consequences of treating everyone as an enemy. You cannot build a prosperous life while at war with everyone around you, because prosperity requires cooperation, trust, and positive relationships, all of which are destroyed by habitual anger. Dishonesty manifests as the thought, "No one will know. It's just a small lie. The truth would hurt them. I deserve this, even if I have to lie to get it." These thoughts promise short-term advantage, and indeed, dishonesty often does provide immediate benefits. But dishonesty is not strategy. Strategy is the intelligent pursuit of long-term advantage through ethical means. Dishonesty is the sacrifice of long-term advantage for short-term gain, the destruction of your reputation and relationships for momentary profit. And this thought pattern, repeated over time, creates a character defined by untrustworthiness, paranoia about being discovered, inability to form genuine relationships because every relationship is based on deception and eventual exposure and ruin when the lies inevitably collapse under their own weight. The man who thinks dishonest thoughts habitually eventually becomes unemployable, unloved and isolated, not because dishonest people are cosmically punished, but because no one wants to associate with someone they cannot trust. The chain of dishonesty leads to complete destruction of social and economic capital, not through divine intervention, but through the natural operation of human relationships within which trust is the fundamental currency. The replacement of these weak links requires installing links of steel in their place, industry instead of laziness, patience instead of anger, truth instead of dishonesty. But these replacements are not simply the opposite thoughts. They are positive qualities that must be actively cultivated, not merely the absence of the negative qualities. Industry is not just not being lazy. It is the positive habit of finding meaning and satisfaction in productive work, of taking pride in doing things well, of understanding that your work is how you create value in the world, and that creating value is the foundation of all legitimate prosperity. Industry means choosing to do difficult things, not because you feel like it, but because they need to be done, and finding in that choice a sense of power and self-respect that far exceeds any pleasure that comes from avoiding the work. When you think thoughts of industry, you forge links of productive capacity that build a chain pulling you toward prosperity. Patience is not just not being angry. It is the positive habit of responding to frustration and injustice with strategic thinking rather than emotional reaction, of maintaining your composure under stress, of understanding that most conflicts escalate because someone chose escalation when de-escalation was possible. Patience means choosing to wait for the right moment rather than forcing action prematurely, choosing to understand before judging, choosing to preserve relationships rather than winning arguments. When you think thoughts of patience, you forge links of social capital that build a chain of positive relationships and cooperative opportunities. Truth is not just not being dishonest. It is the positive habit of aligning your words with reality, regardless of convenience, of honoring your commitments even when breaking them would be profitable, of building a reputation for such absolute reliability that your word alone is sufficient guarantee of your performance. Truth means choosing short-term disadvantage when necessary to maintain long-term integrity. Understanding that your reputation is your most valuable asset and that a reputation for honesty, once lost, is nearly impossible to rebuild. When you think thoughts of truth, You forge links of trustworthiness that build a chain of relationships, opportunities, and social capital that multiplies your effectiveness far beyond what you could achieve alone. These three positive qualities, industry, patience, and truth, are the steel links that Alan recommends as replacements for the lead links of laziness, anger, and dishonesty. They are not easy to install. They require deliberate practice, constant vigilance, and willingness to sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term success. But they are the only materials from which a chain strong enough to pull you to the top can be forged. The practical process of replacing weak links with strong ones operates through attention management. You cannot control which thoughts appear in your consciousness, but you can control which thoughts you give attention to, which thoughts you develop and act upon, and which thoughts you immediately dismiss. When a thought of laziness appears, "I'll do it later," you immediately recognize it as a weak link and replace it with a thought of industry. "I'll do it now, and I'll do it well." This replacement does not happen automatically. It requires conscious effort, especially in the early stages when the weak link is your habitual pattern and the strong link is unfamiliar. But with repetition, the replacement becomes easier, and eventually it becomes automatic. The neural pathways that supported the old thought pattern weaken from disuse, and new neural pathways that support the new thought pattern strengthen through repetition. This is not just metaphorical language. The physical structure of your brain changes based on which thoughts you habitually think, and this neuroplastic reality means that you are literally rebuilding your brain every day through the quality of your thoughts. You are the blacksmith forging your own chains, but you are also the sculptor reshaping your own brain, and the sculpture you create through your daily choices determines the quality of every experience you will have for the rest of your life. The ultimate goal of this rectification process is automaticity of excellence, a state in which right thinking, right action, and right character become so habitual that they require no conscious effort. The beginner must constantly monitor his thoughts, catching weak links and replacing them with strong ones through continuous vigilance. This is exhausting, and many people give up because they underestimate how long this vigilance must be maintained. But if you persist, if you continue the daily audit and replacement process for months and years, eventually the new patterns become automatic. You reach a state where industry is your default response, where patience is your natural mode, where truth is what you speak without even thinking about it. At this stage, you are no longer consciously forging the chain. The chain forges itself through the habitual operation of your reformed character. This is Alan's ultimate promise, that by taking conscious control of your thought patterns now, you can create a future in which right action happens automatically, where you do not have to force yourself to do the right thing because right action is simply who you are. This transformation from conscious effort to unconscious competence, from struggling against weak links to automatically forging strong ones, is the mastery that justifies all the earlier discipline. The iron law that Alan describes is not merely a punisher of wrong action, but equally, perhaps more importantly, a protector and enforcer of right action. And understanding this dual nature transforms your entire relationship with causation from fear to confidence. Most men focus exclusively on the negative aspect of the law, worrying about how their mistakes will be punished, living in anxiety about which old debts might come due unexpectedly. But this focus is exactly backwards. The true power of the iron law lies not in its punishment of the wicked, but in its guarantee to the righteous, its absolute promise that if you forge a chain of right thought and right action, it will bind you to success as inevitably as the wrong chain binds you to failure. The mechanism is identical. The reliability is identical. The mathematical certainty is identical. The only difference is the direction of the outcome. If you forge a chain of right thought and right action, linking each correct thought to each appropriate action, each action to each positive result, each result to each elevated circumstance, you create a chain so strong that it becomes impossible for you to fail, not because you are lucky or blessed, but because you have engineered failure to be a logical impossibility given the causes you have set in motion. Consider what this means practically. The same law that ensures effect cannot be divorced from cause applies equally to positive and negative causation. If negative causes must produce negative effects, then positive causes must produce positive effects with the same absolute reliability. If dishonest action must eventually produce ruin, then honest action must eventually produce prosperity. If lazy habits must eventually produce poverty, then industrious habits must eventually produce wealth. If angry thoughts must eventually produce isolation, then patient thoughts must eventually produce rich relationships. The law is perfectly symmetrical. It does not favor virtue because virtue is morally superior. It favors virtue because virtue is causal alignment with prosperity, while vice is causal alignment with destruction. When you think right thoughts and take right actions, you are not appeasing a cosmic judge or earning divine favor. You are simply operating in harmony with the laws that govern prosperity, the same way a farmer who plants good seeds in fertile soil at the right time is operating in harmony with the laws that govern agriculture. The harvest is not a reward for good behavior. The harvest is the inevitable result of correct application of agricultural principles. Similarly, success is not a reward for virtue. Success is the inevitable result of correct application of causal principles. This understanding eliminates the gambling mentality that most men bring to success. They think of success as a lottery, where virtuous behavior increases your odds but cannot guarantee the outcome, where you might do everything right and still fail due to bad luck. But Allen reveals that there is no luck, no random chance, no cosmic lottery. There is only law, cause and effect operating with absolute reliability. If you forge the right chain, you cannot fail, not because the universe owes you success, but because success is the mathematically inevitable result of the chain you forged. This is the meaning of locking in your success. You are not hoping for success. You are not praying for success. You are not trying to attract success through positive thinking. You are engineering success through precise application of known causal principles, building a chain so strong that it drags you to the top, regardless of temporary obstacles, setbacks, or discouragements. The chain might pull you slowly. The chain might encounter resistance, but the chain cannot break if each link is properly forged, and eventually the destination is reached because the law makes any other outcome impossible. The confidence that comes from understanding this principle is qualitatively different from the fragile confidence of positive thinking or the brittle confidence of denial. It is not confidence that nothing will go wrong. Things will go wrong constantly because you live in a world of friction, resistance, and other actors pursuing their own goals. It is confidence that nothing can permanently stop you because you have allied yourself with law rather than fighting against it, because you have built your chain according to specifications that guarantee its strength, because you understand that temporary setbacks are merely delays in the inevitable arrival at your destination, rather than evidence that you are on the wrong path. The man who forges the good chain walks through adversity with the calm assurance of someone who knows that the outcome is already determined by the causes he has set in motion. He does not panic when obstacles appear. He does not doubt when progress is slow. He does not quit when others would give up. He maintains his course because he understands the law, and understanding the law gives him a foundation of certainty that no external circumstance can shake. This certainty is particularly powerful when you face the inevitable period that Allen calls the dark night, that time between planting and harvest when you have done all the right things but have not yet seen the results, when you are still paying old debts while simultaneously earning new credits, when the chain you are forging seems to be pulling you nowhere because the links have not yet accumulated sufficient length to reach the destination. This is the period where most men fail, where they abandon the good chain they started building, because they cannot yet see where it is leading, where they return to old destructive patterns, because at least those patterns are familiar. But the man who understands the law does not abandon his chain during the dark night. He knows that the delay between cause and effect is not evidence that the law is not working, but evidence that the law is working exactly as it should, taking the time necessary to transform his new thoughts and actions into new circumstances. He trusts the law not with blind faith, but with educated certainty, the same way an engineer trusts that a bridge built to correct specifications will hold weight even before the first car drives across it. The practical application of this principle means you must audit your chain regularly. not to anxiously check for weak links, but to confidently verify that each new link is properly forged. Are you thinking the thoughts that align with your goals? Are you taking the actions that implement those thoughts? Are you maintaining the discipline required to keep the chain building, even when you do not see immediate results? If you can answer yes to these questions, then success is guaranteed, not as a possibility, but as a mathematical certainty, not as a hope, but as an engineering conclusion. The timeline might be longer than you prefer. The path might be different than you envisioned. But the destination is locked in, determined by the chain you are forging right now. This is why Alan speaks with such absolute confidence about the relationship between cause and effect. He is not offering motivational platitudes or wishful thinking. He is describing mechanical operations of law as reliable as gravity, as predictable as sunrise, as certain as mathematics. And once you see these operations clearly, once you understand the mechanism by which thoughts become circumstances, you gain access to a power that most men never suspect exists, the power to make success inevitable by making failure impossible through correct application of causal law. The construction of the good chain requires the same attention to detail that the destruction of the bad chain required, but with opposite intent. Where you previously identified and eliminated weak links, you now identify and install strong links. Where you previously traced chains of destruction back to their origins in wrong thought, you now trace chains of construction forward to their inevitable conclusions in right circumstances. Where you previously audited your mind for thoughts that would destroy you, you now audit your mind for thoughts that will elevate you. The process is identical. The vigilance is identical. But the direction is reversed, and that reversal of direction changes everything. You are no longer playing defense against your own worst tendencies. You are playing offense toward your highest possibilities. You are no longer trying to avoid disaster. You are deliberately engineering triumph. You are no longer hoping that somehow things will work out despite your habits. You are ensuring that things must work out because of your habits. The specific strong links you must forge will vary depending on your goals, but the principle is universal. Each link must connect thought to action, action to result, result to elevated capacity to larger opportunity. A man pursuing financial prosperity must forge links of financial discipline, connecting the thought "I will live below my means" to the action of saving, connecting saving to the result of accumulated capital, connecting accumulated capital to the elevated capacity to invest, connecting investment capacity to larger opportunities for wealth creation. Each link makes the next link possible. Each link strengthens the entire chain. And the chain, once built to sufficient length, becomes a cable of such strength that poverty becomes impossible for the man holding it, not because he is lucky, but because he has built an economic structure that cannot collapse. Similarly, a man pursuing excellence in his craft must forge links of deliberate practice, connecting the thought "I will master the fundamentals" to the action of daily discipline, connecting daily discipline to the result of improved skill, connecting improved skill to the elevated capacity to tackle harder challenges, connecting harder challenges to larger opportunities for recognition and reward. The specific content differs, but the structure is identical. Thought, action, result, capacity, opportunity, each element linking to the next in an unbreakable chain. The maintenance of the good chain requires eternal vigilance, not because the chain might spontaneously break, but because you might stop forging new links. The chain you built yesterday does not automatically extend itself. It requires your daily participation, your constant attention, your unwavering commitment to add one more link today, one more link tomorrow, one more link every day until the chain reaches the destination. This is why most men fail to achieve great things. They start well, forging a few strong links, then they become complacent, assuming the chain will complete itself. But the chain only grows through your active participation. Stop forging, and the chain stops growing. Stop growing, and you remain wherever you currently are, never reaching the destination that was within your grasp, if only you had continued the work. Alan's teaching is simultaneously encouraging and demanding. Encouraging because it promises that success is absolutely achievable through correct application of principle, Demanding because it requires you to apply those principles consistently over extended periods without wavering, without quitting, without taking vacations from your own destiny. The blacksmith does not forge a masterwork by swinging the hammer once. He forges it by swinging the hammer 10,000 times, each blow adding a tiny increment of shape and strength, until the accumulated effect of all those blows produces something magnificent. The ultimate promise of the good chain is not merely external success, wealth, recognition, achievement, but internal transformation into the kind of person for whom external success is natural and inevitable. This is the most profound aspect of Alan's teaching. You are not just building a chain toward prosperity, you are rebuilding yourself into a person of prosperity, transforming your character from the raw material of undisciplined potential into the refined product of disciplined mastery. The external circumstances are merely the visible manifestation of the internal transformation. The wealth you accumulate is merely the physical evidence of the wealth consciousness you developed. The respect you command is merely the social recognition of the respect-worthy character you built. The success you achieve is merely the natural consequence of having become the kind of person who operates according to success principles so consistently that success is the only possible outcome. This transformation of identity from who you were to who you must become to achieve what you want is the real work of forging the good chain. The external links are important, but they are secondary to the internal links, the thought patterns and character qualities that produce the external behaviors that produce the external results. Change yourself at the deepest level, and changed circumstances follow with the same necessity that fire follows the combination of fuel, oxygen, and heat. When you truly understand the iron law, when you internalize the principle that effect cannot be divorced from cause with such completeness that it becomes your operating system rather than merely an intellectual concept you occasionally remember, something remarkable happens to your emotional state. Anxiety disappears. Not because you become delusional about potential problems or dangers, but because you understand that if you have planted the right seeds, if you have forged the right links, if you have set the correct causes in motion, then the harvest must come. The outcome is not uncertain. The outcome is mathematically determined by the inputs you provided. Your task is not to worry about whether the law will work. It will work because law cannot not work, but simply to ensure you are working with the law rather than against it. This understanding produces a state of calm confidence that observers might mistake for arrogance, but which is actually the opposite. It is the humility of acknowledging that you are not the source of success, but merely the agent who applies the principles that produce success, combined with the confidence of knowing that if you apply the principles correctly, the results are inevitable. The elimination of anxiety does not mean elimination of effort. You still work, you still plan, you still exercise discipline, but you work without the desperate energy of someone who fears failure, without the anxious striving of someone who does not trust the process, without the exhausting emotional turmoil of someone who alternates between hope and despair, depending on daily circumstances. Instead, you work with the calm efficiency of someone executing a proven formula, checking each step against the instructions, verifying that you are following the recipe correctly, knowing that if you follow the recipe, the cake will rise. This is not blind faith. It is educated trust in the reliability of causation. You do not need to force the cake to rise through willpower or positive thinking. You just need to follow the recipe, keep the oven at the correct temperature, and wait the appropriate time. The law of baking will handle the rest. Similarly, you do not need to force your success through anxiety or desperation. You just need to forge the correct links, maintain the correct disciplines, and wait for the chain to reach sufficient length. The law of causation will handle the rest. This state of calm confidence also transforms your relationship with time. Most men experience time as an enemy, constantly anxious that they are running out of time, that opportunities are passing them by, that they are falling behind some invisible schedule. But when you understand the law, time becomes your ally. You know that the chain you are forging today will reach its destination in its own time, that rushing the process will not accelerate the results, but might actually compromise the quality of the links, that patience is not passive waiting, but active trust in the law's reliable operation. You walk with the confidence of a man who has planted corn in spring and waits for autumn harvest, not anxiously checking the field every day to see if the corn has grown, not trying to force the corn to mature faster than its natural growth cycle allows, but simply maintaining the field, protecting the crop, and knowing that harvest will arrive in due season. The farmer does not fear that the corn might not grow. He knows it will grow if he planted good seeds, tended the field properly, and gave the crop sufficient time. Similarly, you do not fear that your efforts might not produce results. You know they will produce results if you planted good thoughts, maintained good disciplines, and give the chain sufficient time to form. The practical manifestation of this anxiety-free state is what we might call strategic patience, a combination of aggressive action in the present with calm acceptance of delayed results. You do everything within your power today to forge the next link correctly. You hold nothing back, you give your best effort, you maintain the highest standards. But having done everything within your power, you release attachment to immediate results, knowing that results will arrive according to the law's timeline rather than your preferred timeline. This is different from lazy patience, which is merely an excuse for inaction dressed up as trust. Strategic patience acts decisively while waiting calmly. It works intensely while resting peacefully. It strives mightily while trusting completely. This combination of opposites seems paradoxical to the untrained mind, but it is perfectly natural to someone who understands the law. You act because action is required to forge the chain. You rest because anxiety about results is unnecessary when you trust the law. The action and the rest do not contradict each other. They complement each other, creating a balanced approach that maximizes both productivity and peace. The confidence Alan describes also extends to your relationship with obstacles and setbacks. Most men interpret obstacles as evidence that they are on the wrong path, that the universe is against them, that they should give up and try something else. But when you understand the law, you interpret obstacles differently. An obstacle is not evidence that you are forging the wrong chain. It is simply resistance that the chain must overcome on its way to the destination. The chain is pulling you forward, but the path is not frictionless. There is weight to move, there is resistance to overcome. There are temporary barriers to break through. But none of this means the chain is weak or the destination is unreachable. It simply means the journey requires strength, and the chain must be strong enough to overcome the resistance. Each obstacle you overcome actually strengthens the chain by proving its reliability, by demonstrating that it can bear weight without breaking, by building your confidence that the next obstacle will also be conquered. The man who understands this interprets setbacks as feedback rather than failure, as information about where the chain needs reinforcement rather than evidence that the chain should be abandoned. This transformation of interpretation, from anxiety to confidence, from fear to trust, from desperation to calm, is perhaps the most valuable result of understanding the iron law, even more valuable than the external success the law produces. A man who achieves wealth while living in constant anxiety about losing it is not truly prosperous. A man who achieves recognition while constantly doubting his worth is not truly successful. But a man who walks through life with the calm confidence of someone who knows he is forging the right chain, who trusts the law to produce inevitable results, who remains peaceful in the face of obstacles because he understands they are temporary resistance rather than permanent barriers. This man is already successful at the level of being, regardless of his current level of having. And this internal success, this transformation of character and consciousness, is both the means to external success and something infinitely more valuable than external success. The external success will come because the law guarantees it. But even if it were delayed longer than you prefer, you would already possess something that most wealthy men never attain: peace of mind, confidence in your path, freedom from anxiety, and the unshakable certainty that you are living in harmony with the fundamental laws that govern prosperity. The final aspect of this inevitability principle concerns the relationship between effort and outcome. Most men believe that success requires exhausting effort, that you must sacrifice peace for achievement, that the price of prosperity is chronic stress and anxiety. But Alan reveals that this belief is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how causation works. Effort is required, but anxious effort is actually less effective than calm effort because anxiety disrupts judgment, wastes energy on worry rather than action, and causes you to make poor decisions from a state of fear. The ideal state is relaxed intensity, working hard but without inattention, striving mightily but without emotional turmoil, giving your best while trusting that your best, consistently applied over time, must produce results according to law. This is why Allen speaks of walking with confidence rather than struggling with anxiety. The confident man accomplishes more with less stress because he is not wasting energy fighting himself, doubting his path, or worrying about outcomes. He puts all his energy into forging the next link correctly, and having forged it correctly, he moves calmly to the next link, trusting that the accumulated effect of all these correctly forged links will eventually produce the inevitable outcome. This is the mastery of causation, maximum effectiveness with minimum anxiety, supreme accomplishment with inner peace, external achievement with internal serenity. And this mastery is available to anyone willing to study the law, trust the law, and work with the law rather than against it. The synthesis of all that has been revealed, the iron law's operation, the mechanism of the causal chain, the dual nature of consequence as both punishment and protection, the necessity of destroying weak links and forging strong ones, the transformation of anxiety into confidence through understanding, culminates in a single empowering recognition. You are the master of your fate because you are the master of your chain, and the chain you forge today is literally constructing the life you will live tomorrow. This is not metaphor or motivation. It is mechanical description of how consciousness translates into circumstance through the intermediary of cause and effect. Every thought you think is selecting a link. Every action you take is forging that link. Every day you live is adding to the chain. And the chain, once built to sufficient length, pulls you inexorably toward its destination. Whether that destination is the dungeon or the palace, poverty or prosperity, suffering or satisfaction. You cannot escape this process, but you can direct it. And directing it, rather than being unconsciously directed by it, is the difference between mastery and slavery. The wisdom that emerges from deep understanding of these principles is that you must forge your chain with the same care an engineer designs a bridge that will carry thousands of lives. The bridge engineer knows that a single weak component can cause catastrophic failure, that shoddy materials will eventually give way under stress, that cutting corners in construction means accepting the possibility of disaster. So he specifies every component carefully, inspects every connection thoroughly, tests every element before trusting weight to it. Similarly, you must approach the construction of your causal chain with engineering precision, knowing that weak links will eventually break, that mediocre thoughts will eventually produce mediocre results, that compromise with principle will eventually produce catastrophic failure. The difference is that when a bridge collapses, it destroys others along with the builder. When your causal chain breaks, you are the primary casualty, suffering the consequences of your own careless construction. This makes the motivation for excellence entirely self-interested. You build well not because someone is watching, or because morality requires it, but because your future self will either thank you or curse you for the quality of the chain you are currently forging. The practical expression of mastery is establishing non-negotiable standards for every link in your chain, refusing to forge any link that does not meet those standards, accepting that maintaining standards means sacrificing short-term convenience for long-term security. Most men have no standards beyond good enough, which usually means whatever I can get away with, or whatever requires minimal effort. But the master understands that good enough links create a good enough life, which is another way of describing mediocrity, dissatisfaction, and the constant anxiety of knowing you could have done better but chose not to. The alternative is establishing standards of excellence, defining precisely what quality of thought, action, and character you will accept from yourself, and then refusing to violate those standards regardless of circumstances, convenience, or cost. This is difficult because excellence is always more demanding than mediocrity, always requires more time and energy, always forces you to sacrifice easier alternatives. But the difficulty is front-loaded. You pay the price of excellence now, during construction, and then you benefit from excellent results later during operation. Or you accept mediocrity now, enjoying the ease of low standards during construction, and then you suffer the consequences of structural failure later when the chain breaks under stress. The transformation from unconscious forging to conscious engineering of your chain requires developing what might be called causal literacy, the ability to read the connection between present causes and future effects with the same clarity that literate people read text on a page. Most men are causally illiterate. They cannot see the connection between their daily thoughts and their eventual circumstances. They cannot trace their current suffering back to its roots in past choices. They cannot predict their future condition by examining their present habits. This illiteracy leaves them helpless, blown about by circumstances they cannot understand, victims of effects whose causes they cannot identify. But causal literacy transforms you from victim to creator, from effect to cause, from someone who suffers fate to someone who engineers destiny. You develop this literacy through patient study of the law in operation, both in your own life and in the lives around you, learning to see the invisible chains forming, recognizing the early indicators that predict later outcomes, understanding the long-term consequences of short-term choices. This literacy is the foundation of mastery because you cannot control what you cannot see, and you cannot see causal connections until you learn the language in which causation speaks. The ultimate message of empowerment that emerges from James Allen's teaching is simultaneously humbling and exhilarating. You are not a victim of circumstances beyond your control, but you are also not exempt from the consequences of your choices. You have complete power over the causes you set in motion, but you have no power to escape the effects those causes produce. This is the paradox of human freedom. Total freedom to choose, zero freedom to avoid consequences. And within this paradox lies the key to transformation. If you have been suffering, if your circumstances are less than you desire, if you feel trapped in a life you did not consciously choose, Allen's message is not, "You are to blame," but, "You have power." The suffering you experience is not random punishment. It is the harvest of seeds you planted, perhaps unknowingly, perhaps long ago. But if your past plantings produced suffering, your present plantings can produce prosperity. The law that bound you to suffering will bind you to success if you forge the right chain. You are not condemned to repeat your past. You are only required to pay for it while simultaneously creating something better. The empowerment comes from recognizing that every single day is a new opportunity to forge a different link, to plant a different seed, to choose a different thought. You cannot change yesterday. The chain you forged in the past is already complete, already pulling you toward whatever destination those links lead to. But you can change today, and changing today means changing tomorrow, because today's link is tomorrow's pull. This present moment power is absolute. No one can take it from you. No circumstance can eliminate it. No past mistake can erase it. As long as you are conscious, as long as you can think, as long as you can choose, you retain the power to forge a new link right now. And if you forge a new link right now, and another tomorrow, and another the next day, eventually those new links accumulate into a new chain pulling you in a new direction. The old chain still exists. You may still be paying old debts. But the new chain is forming simultaneously, and eventually the new chain becomes longer and stronger than the old chain, and your direction changes from suffering to satisfaction, from poverty to prosperity, from bondage to freedom. The practical message is that you must begin now, today, this moment, not waiting for perfect conditions or complete understanding or final preparation. The perfect time to start forging the right chain is always right now, because right now is the only time that actually exists, the only moment in which you actually have power to choose. Waiting for a better time is itself a weak link, a decision to forge another link in the old chain while postponing the construction of the new chain. Every day you wait is another day the old chain grows longer. Another day you move further in the wrong direction. Another day you increase the debt that must eventually be paid. But every day you act is another day the new chain grows stronger. Another day you move toward the right direction. Another day you earn credits that will eventually be paid. The choice between these two paths is not a one-time decision. It is a moment-by-moment choice, repeated thousands of times per day, every time you think a thought or take an action. And the accumulation of those thousands of small choices is what determines whether you end up in the dungeon or the palace. The transformation Alan calls you to is not cosmetic or temporary. It is fundamental and permanent, a reformation of character so complete that your old self would not recognize your new self, a reconstruction of consciousness so thorough that your old patterns become literally impossible because they contradict who you have become. This is why the work is difficult. You are not just changing behavior, you are changing identity. You are not just modifying habits, you are reconstructing personality. You are not just improving circumstances. You are transforming the causal engine that generates circumstances. This level of change cannot happen overnight. It cannot happen through weekend workshops or motivational speeches or quick fixes. It requires sustained effort over extended time, daily discipline maintained for months and years, until the new patterns become so deeply ingrained that they operate automatically, until right thinking becomes your default mode, until excellent action becomes your natural expression, until the chain of success forges itself through the habitual operation of your transformed character. The message of empowerment also includes a warning: you will be tested. The old chain does not release its hold easily. The old patterns will attempt to reassert themselves. The old debts will come due and tempt you to abandon the new chain while you are still paying old bills. This is the dark night that every transformer must pass through. The period where you are simultaneously paying the price of past mistakes while investing in future success, working harder than you ever worked before while seeing fewer results than you expected, maintaining discipline while doubt whispers that you are wasting your time. This is where most men fail, where they abandon the new chain before it reaches sufficient length to pull them to safety, where they return to old patterns because at least those patterns are familiar. But Alan's teaching provides the antidote to this failure: understanding. When you understand the law, when you know with certainty that the new chain must eventually produce new results, when you trust the process because you comprehend the mechanics, you gain the strength to persist through the dark night. You do not quit when progress is slow because you understand that growth takes time. You do not doubt when results are delayed because you understand that causation requires time to mature. You do not abandon the path when obstacles appear because you understand that resistance is not evidence of wrong direction, but confirmation that you are moving forward against inertia. The final message of empowerment is that you are not alone in this work. Every human being is subject to the same law, forging chains according to the same principles, experiencing consequences according to the same mechanics. You are not suffering because you are uniquely cursed. You are suffering because you, like most humans, have been forging chains unconsciously, planting seeds randomly, thinking thoughts carelessly. But you are also not unique in your potential for transformation. The same law that has bound others to success is available to bind you to success. The same principles that have elevated others from poverty to prosperity can elevate you. The same mechanics that have transformed others from mediocrity to mastery can transform you. There is no secret society that knows these principles while keeping them from you. There is no elite group that has special access to the law while you are excluded. The law operates for everyone identically. The only difference between those who succeed and those who fail is that the successful have learned to work with the law while the unsuccessful continue fighting against it, either through ignorance of its operation or through refusal to accept its requirements. You can join the successful at any moment by simply beginning to forge the right chain, and that beginning can happen right now, in this moment, with your very next thought. The ancient masters understood something that modern men have forgotten in their rush for instant gratification and easy success. The true measure of a teaching is not whether it makes you feel good in the moment, but whether it provides the tools to transform your life completely if you actually apply it. James Allen does not offer you comfort, he offers you power. He does not promise that the transformation will be easy or quick. He promises that the transformation is possible and inevitable if you understand the law and work with it consistently. His teaching is not a consolation for victims, but a manual for masters. not a philosophical curiosity, but a practical engineering guide, not entertainment for the mind, but a blueprint for rebuilding your life from the foundation up. And the central insight he bequeaths to you is this: effect can never be divorced from cause. Suffering is the remedy which the law applies to purge the mental house. This is the iron law in its most condensed form. You cannot have effects without causes. You cannot escape consequences, but consequences are not punishment in the vindictive sense. They are remedies, corrections, feedback mechanisms that show you where your thinking is misaligned with reality, where your chains are weak, where your garden is full of weeds. Suffering, in Allen's framework, is not evidence that the universe hates you, or that you are cursed, or that life is fundamentally unjust. Suffering is evidence that you have been forging wrong chains, planting wrong seeds, thinking wrong thoughts. And the purpose of suffering is not to crush you, but to wake you up, to force you to examine your mental house, to compel you to identify and eliminate the toxic thoughts that are producing toxic circumstances. This is why Allen speaks of suffering as remedy rather than punishment. A remedy cures disease. The disease is wrong thinking. The suffering is the bitter medicine that finally motivates you to change your thinking, because continuing the old patterns has become too painful. This is harsh truth, but it is liberating truth because it means you are never powerless. Even in your deepest suffering, even when you feel most victimized, you retain the power to examine your mental house, identify the toxic thoughts that produce the suffering, and begin replacing them with healthy thoughts that will produce health circumstances. The suffering will continue until the mental house is purged, but the purging is within your power, which means the end of suffering is within your power, which means you are never truly trapped no matter how desperate your circumstances appear. The challenge Allen issues is not to believe him on faith, but to test his teaching in the laboratory of your own life. Break the old chain that is dragging you toward disaster. Begin forging the new chain that will pull you toward destiny. Do this not as a dramatic one-time decision, but as a daily discipline, examining your thoughts each morning, forging your links throughout the day, auditing your progress each evening. Do this not for a week or a month, but for as long as it takes to transform from unconscious forging to conscious engineering, from victim consciousness to master consciousness, from someone who suffers fate to someone who creates destiny. The test is simple. Plant right seeds and observe whether you harvest right results. Forge right links and observe whether you move toward right destinations. Think right thoughts and observe whether you create right circumstances. The law either works or it does not. If it works, you gain access to the most powerful technology ever discovered for human transformation. If it does not work, you lose nothing but the time invested in the experiment. But Allen, having tested these principles in his own life and observed them in countless others, declares with absolute confidence that the law works, that the chain forms, that the harvest comes, that effects follow causes with mathematical precision, and that you can use this law to engineer any life you desire if you are willing to pay the price of disciplined application over sufficient time. The final decree is not a request, but a challenge, not advice, but a summons to action. You now know the truth. You are the blacksmith forging your own chains. Every thought selects a link. Every action forges that link. Every day adds to the chain. And the chain you forge today determines the life you live tomorrow. This knowledge is simultaneously a burden and a gift. It is a burden because you can no longer hide behind excuses, can no longer claim victimhood, can no longer blame your circumstances on forces beyond your control. But it is a gift because it means you have complete power to transform your life by transforming your thoughts, to change your destination by changing your chain, to escape bondage by forging links of freedom. The old chain that has bound you to suffering must be broken. The new chain that will bind you to success must be forged. This is not optional. This is not a suggestion. This is the law. You are forging a chain whether you realize it or not, whether you choose consciously or drift unconsciously. The only question is, what chain will you forge? Will you forge the chain that drags you to the dungeon of poverty, mediocrity, and regret? Or will you forge the chain that pulls you to the palace of prosperity, excellence, and satisfaction? Are you ready to take responsibility for your chain? Are you ready to break free from unconscious patterns and begin conscious engineering? Are you ready to lock in your destiny by forging links so strong that failure becomes impossible? Write in the comments, "I forge my future." Let the hammering begin. The forge is burning. The hammer is in your hand. The iron is hot. Strike now. Strike true. And forge the chain that will bind you to the life you were meant to live.